The extractive industry is really responsible for a whole lot of that. But, it's around the globe. It's a global issue. And all the elements of the earth are finite. It's not forever. And they're now digging deeper and deeper and running out of material. So looking into the future for our children and not leaving much for them. It is what it is, and it's never been good for us, so it's just worse. We've been the bad guys. We're the pesky redskins. Now, you can't take land from a good guy, and that's why they make us what we are. Stole a lot of land and never paid and never, just they call this country theirs, but it's not. We don't get any encouragement. It's a fight for survival. And we were here from the beginning. Our first discussion with the Dutch, 1613. So we've been watching you for a long time. Serious now. Population, serious. We're in global warming now, or so-called. Caught people off base. I made a report to the UN in the year 2000. My report was the ice is melting, folks. That's 23 years ago. So they all nodded their head in agreement, but never did much about it. So we've squandered 23 years that you're not going to get back. We're in serious trouble, and you're looking at an existential crisis now. Global warming is a soft term. It's an existential crisis. It's severe, as you can see. Over 250 tornadoes in one day ought to wake somebody up. And this is just the beginning. We're in the early part of it. It's going to get worse, faster. The extractive industries are quite responsible for a lot of it. Corporations. I work with the Navajo people for a long time, 50 years now. The native people are really, anybody that's there in the Southwest in serious trouble. Issue is water. There's not enough water. The United States just informed the Navajos that they're not supporting them in the water situation. You're on your own, is what they said. And the water that they was using for years was slurry and coal from the mines in the Navajo country to Nevada. You can imagine how much water was used to slurry coal for 100 or so many years. Now they're out of water, drinking water. And it's the same with LA. LA doesn't have their own water. They're getting their water all the way, from Idaho and the rivers up north. They're totally dependent for no water. In serious trouble, folks. So we're all in this together. There's no one's going to escape. And so it's all hands on deck. Well, I ramble a lot, so and I never prepare, speak from the hip, so to speak. But I've been at this for a long time, just doing the best we can here. I'm a runner for the Onondaga Nation, for the Haudenosaunee, the Six Nation Iroquois Confederacy. Because I have been educated enough to speak the language, I get assigned to go out and do the speaking for them. So it's, not going to be happy days, but it's real and people don't pay attention to it.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. I'm Allison Van Dyke. I'm the Executive Director of the Temple of Understanding, and I want to welcome also our panelists. The title of our talk today is The Balancing Act, Extracting Needed Minerals and the Green Economy. This is a series that's ongoing for the Temple of Understanding. We are a 63-year-old interfaith organization, and our mission is to advocate for interfaith values at the United Nations and as an NGO around the world. Our focus is basically working to increase the awareness of religious leaders and actors about the climate crisis that we are facing and its negative impact on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, in particular, peace and justice, women's health and safety, food sovereignty, and ensuring a healthy planet for all. So today it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote address given by Chief Oren Lyons. Chief Lyons has been a recipient of a Hollister Award for his interfaith work at our 30th anniversary celebration. He is a Faithkeeper of the Turtle Clan, and he serves as a member chief of the Onondaga Council of Chiefs and the Grand Council of the Iroquois Confederacy, the Haudenosaunee peoples. He holds a title, Professor Emeritus at SUNY University, Buffalo. He also has a doctorate from Syracuse University, and the Lyons Hall is named after him at his alma mater. He is, I'd call it a Renaissance man. He is an accomplished artist, author, lacrosse player, environmentalist, and film consultant. Oren is a leading voice at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Human Rights for Indigenous Peoples. He serves on many boards and has received many awards, including Sweden's prestigious Friends of the Children Award, along with his friend, Nelson Mandela. It is my great honor to welcome Chief Oren Lyons.
Well, thank you. That was quite a list. I don't know whether, I guess the period of time, I'm now 93 years old. So I've had a lot of experience. I'm speaking basically from experience. And growing up in a native nation in the territory of Onondaga, upstate New York, just south of Syracuse is where we are, our headquarters, and land here never belonged to anybody but us, you know. So we're still on original territory. Not much left, but we're still here. And as our numbers of indigenous people have diminished, the numbers of the white people from Europe and so forth, and Black people who have been brought here as slaves early on, they've grown. So population, I would say, is a major factor today. From my early life in 1950, I was 20 years old, and there were something like 2.5 billion people in the whole world. So here we are, you know, 70 years later, and there's now over 8 billion people. Triple the population in one lifetime. When you think about that, then you understand that we're we're pushing the limits of what the earth can do for population at all. And in this development and the population of humanity grow to what it is today, we've diminished the natural world populations all over. Animals are disappearing completely. Whole species are going and disappearing fast because they don't have the food and the protection that they used to have, because human population has taken over almost everything. So we're in a period of diminishing returns, very at a point of acceleration. There's not much happy news that I can bring to this discussion, except to say that we're still here. It's not over, but we're pushing the limits now. There has to be peace, I would say. Number one issue, there has to be peace in the whole world. And peace in the full terms, not simply putting the arms down, but maintaining the arms. It's just destroying all weapons of war. Actually, we're in this very difficult time of one species taking over everything in the whole earth. Nevertheless, the responsibilities that we have as a human species and human beings is that we have an intellect. And in this intellect, we have options. Every day that you wake up, you have an option to either be the best person in the world or the worst. You have that option. And when you apply that to 8 billion people, well, you see where we are. And then when you look at the realities that we face today in the global situation, where we should be conserving everything that we have a full-scale war going on in the Ukraine. We have bombs going off all the time, and every bomb that goes off moves us closer and more finite. So peace is not simply something we look forward to. Peace is very necessary. It is absolutely fundamental. The Haudenosaunee, that's our proper name, and it means people of the Longhouse. We're very old, and our Confederation, they're being studied by different areas, and in Cornell at this point, in Ithaca, New York, they're zeroing in on what they think was the time that we first came together, and it's about 1600 years ago that the Confederation came together by the great peacemaker. There's a big story about that I can't get into. It goes on for days, but we know the story. We keep it going. And as we speak here, our leaders, and many of our people are out in Oneida, Wisconsin, with the Oneida Indian Nation in Wisconsin, and they are going over right now as we speak the principles of the great law of peace. And that's the foundation of the Haudenosaunee, the great law of peace. Contrary to history, which calls us a fierce Iroquois that kill everybody. That's a lie, a big one. And I just mentioned earlier to some of our leaders that are here speaking that you can't take land from a good guy. So taking land from the original people here, you have to make us bad guys. So as far as contemporary people, we're still tipping over wagons, and we're still surrounding wagons, and we're still tipping trains off the railroad tracks, and pesky redskins. That's your history. In the course of my many years, 93 years, I became a professor, if you can imagine, at the University of Buffalo, and I taught there for 37 years. I probably learned more there about people than anywhere, and also helped us to organize our work. It was a base of operations, and John Mohawk, and Rick Hill, and just a great assortment of energy and people there that just worked hard. There were young people, there were students and so forth, but they had a great trust and asked the Confederacy to become more active nationally, internationally. So the issue that we're talking about today, which is extractive industries, has been fundamental to the development of the whole civilization of this world, all based on extraction. These corporate powers basically in charge today are still, I think there was a record set by the United States of oil of over 12.8 million barrels of oil a day. That makes us, the USA, the #1 oil producer in the world. We have passed Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia's second now. And when you hear the discussion about the good earth by leaders from the US, how do you reconcile that with being the #1 extractor of oil in the whole world? So the responsibility of directing traffic or helping to change the course, I would say, is really dependent on meetings like this to educate ourselves and to organize better and to make sure that we began dealing with the realities. And if it is true that the US is now the #1 extractor of oil, then it seems to me that's a good place to start. So the leadership. And I would be very much interested to hear what they are projecting for the future. And knowing that we are now in an existential crisis of heat, it's not going to go away because we're not addressing it as the nations and the human beings around the world. Um, and if we continue to do what we're doing, we diminish this whole idea that our Confederacy was based upon, which was 7 generations. Make all your decisions on behalf of 7th generation coming, the future. And they weren't talking about the shortcut generation of 20 years that has been developed by by corporate powers and nations. 20 years, another generation. The full 80 to 100 years is a generation. And so 7 generations, we were said that we must work for those people in the future, those faces looking up from the earth, layer on layer, waiting their time. And situation today is we're not leaving almost anything for your children, your grandchildren, your great-great-grandchildren, and so on. We're feasting on their table. It's not right. Absolutely not right. So meetings like this, pointing to the extractive industries, is really important because they really are the ones responsible for the depletion of the resources. They call resources, we call life forces of the earth. How we can impact that should be your discussion. From our perspective of Native peoples of this Turtle Island, that's the original name for what you call USA and Canada and North America. Turtle Island is our name for it, and that's ancient. And I would say that this combination of the United States and Canada and so forth, producing 12.8 billion gallons of oil a day is really moving fiercely in the wrong direction. Time now is very critical as you see the world heating up, and we have been predicting the winds, and you see the winds now, the hurricanes, the tornadoes, the rains, the flooding also on the opposite side of it, the lack of water. Places are without water and drying. And water is the issue today, fundamental issue of life. Drinking water, very, very small compared to the oceans. All of that has to be contemplated upon and addressed by organizations like the one that we're talking about today. You know, I worked, for a long time with the Reverend James Parks Morton, who really initiated the organization that you have today. And we worked together a long time ago, and he opened many doors for us, us being the indigenous people. And he gave us a platform, which was the big church up on 16th Street, you know, and we work together on these issues very, very well. He, as you know, has passed on now, and many of my generation are all but gone. So the work now belongs to you, the next generation's coming, and the working generation that I would say, which is, you know, the standard of living and being a lifetime of a human being has gotten longer and longer. So from my observations, I would say that 60 to 70 is now midlife. That used to be old age and the end of it. But now people are living, well, look at myself, I'm 93 years old, you know. That's very unusual. And probably when I was, you know, 1935, when I was 5 years old, life was not that long. So it hasn't been that long that we have developed so many people. And, you know, I would say that huge problem that we face now is the inequity. The inequity is fundamental. We have people who are so poor and so hungry they're even eating dirt. And we have people so wealthy and so sequestered that their biggest problem is waiting in line for a yacht. Well, in between is all of us. So the extractive industries, the ones mining the resources of the world, are responsible and have to be addressed and should be responsible for repaying everything they took. I think we should really begin approaching the idea that corporations should repay everything that they have been extracting, and also that we in America are extracting the most oil in the whole world at the moment. That should be addressed. That should be addressed. And time is of the essence now. From our perspective, Haudenosaunee and Native people, we know there's a point of no return. When you pass that point of no return, that's just it. Then everything is downhill. You leave nothing for the future. So consider in your discussions what I've just talked about and how extractive industries have to be accountable for the damage they've done to this earth. And those very, very wealthy people have to share. And I'll just close now with this whole idea. Long ago, as the Haudenosaunee was kind of guiding the colonies here on a lot of things the history book doesn't talk about. But we always illustrated to them that you had to share. If you want to, you know, they asked us, they said, we want to make a union like yours. That was their exact words in 1775, the Continental Congress. They said, you advised us to make a union like yours. We're now going to take your advice. So our leader said, good, well, the foundation of all of that is to share. Share what you have equally. And they said, that's good. So now, in the, I would say the world that we live in now, you have to buy a share. You buy a share. You flipped everything, and so you have to deal with that. So not much good news except to say that we're here to help address it and do whatever we can collectively as human beings, part of the human family, and the responsibility we have to our future generations have to be addressed right now. And I appreciate the fact that you're going to deal with the culprits who have caused most of that, which is the extractive mining industries. So good luck to all of us, and thank you for listening to what I have to say.
Chief Oren Lyons, thank you very much indeed for that very powerful presentation and for setting us right and for naming where our deepest challenges for this earth, for this planet, for this country indeed lie. Thank you very much for everything you have done, which is deeply humbling to those of us who have the incredible privilege of sharing this particular panel with you. Many thanks for your presence, your service, the symbolism, deep, powerful symbolism, and the actual life that you represent for all of us and continue to serve as a guide to all of us. My name is Azza Karam. I served until very recently as the Secretary General of Religions for Peace. I am a professor of religion and development at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam, and I have the privilege to serve on the United Nations Secretary General's High-Level Advisory Board on Effective Multilateralism, which to our very beloved Chief Leon's wise point also does include humans and corporations at the same time. I wish to begin by giving respectful greetings and gratitude to the owners of the land that I am able to live on now, the Wappinger, the Munsee, Lenape, and the Shachkitoka. I am in New Rochelle, Westchester in New York, and it is on this land that I live and breathe, and I give great gratitude. I also wish to give gratitude to the Temple of Understanding, Alison Van Dyke, the Executive Director, and Susie Mazzosli, the Programs Director, who have engineered to have us all here today to discuss this incredibly critical set of issues. We have just celebrated International Indigenous Peoples Day yesterday. This is a very timely, I think, moment. This country that we have the privilege of living in and on is going through tremendous challenges, political, social, economic, cultural, financial. It is a good time to see and to assess together how we can indeed enable a balancing act, if such there is. But we have a very distinguished panel of speakers who are incredibly well versed in addressing these issues, in being activists in, of, and about these issues, who know the issues and who work to serve so much. So I will, without any further ado, just introduce the fact that we have a few questions that we're asking each of our panelists to reflect on. So I will ask our panelists in order to please introduce themselves rather than me messing an incredible prestigious history up. Just please do introduce yourselves. And please let us know some of your thoughts on the questions. And I'll just narrate the questions now so that they are there in everybody's minds. Should we be mining minerals for electric vehicles or so-called green technologies? Should we actually be mining this? Is there a way that any extractive mining can be done safely with respect to land and people? Is it actually possible for us to transition away from all the extractive mining? And what renewable energy sources do you see as alternatives from religious and spiritual perspectives that each of our speakers has? And in that respect, what are the guiding spiritual or religious principles that would motivate such work? And perhaps you can also please reflect and share some of the strengths and successes of the activist work that has been done so far, and or reflect on the continuing obstacles. We've had a very brilliant expose from Chief Lyons, perhaps from each of your respective spiritual and religious perspectives, we can get to learn a little bit more. And what is one thing that you would encourage all people to do in the name of climate awareness and in supporting the health of our planet? So maybe a quick reflection on, can we do different, this extracting business? Can we do it better? And what are some of the ongoing challenges? What are perhaps some of the successes? And please end your presentation with something that you would encourage people to do in the name of climate awareness. And with that, I am very happy and privileged to give the floor to Luke. Luke, can you take up the first challenge? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And my goodness, to have the first word and follow Chief Lyons, just tremendous gratitude. I'm so appreciative of this chance to share today and be with you all. Azza, Chief Lyons, Michael, Rabbi, and the rest. I am humbled and a little bit like terrified of such depth of questions because, you know, there are no easy answers. To be completely honest, I spent so many hours poring over, you know, Catholic social teaching and all these documents and digging really deep, trying to get to the bottom of all of this. And, you know, the temptation was really strong to say, okay, I'm going to go to this webinar and offer an immediate, easy solution. And you know, that just doesn't last very long. There is no easy answer to any of this. And so I guess I should start with an introduction who I am. And then I have a few slides very briefly as I speak from the Catholic context. And we'll be sharing a lot of the encyclical Laudato Si that Pope Francis wrote in 2015. So just for ease of reference, I'll share some slides. I am Luke Henkel, and I come from all over the place. I grew up traveling around the United States, and currently I live in Chicago. I was blessed to see much of the world at a very young age, and a very long story short, that's what brought me into the environmental movement. I grew up traveling, and I was in religious formation as a Divine Word missionary brother for some time with the Catholic Church. And that was in Chicago. And from there, I discerned out of religious life, but I was blessed to travel around Asia, and I moved to the Philippines for some time. And there I encountered what's known as Smoky Mountain. And that is this area in Manila, which for like 20 or 30 years was the largest actively burning 24 hours a day garbage dump in Southeast Asia. And hundreds of thousands of people lived on this mountain. They were known as basureros, and they scavenged for a livelihood. And their life expectancy was something like 50 years just because of the toxic smoke. I mean, kids were being crushed by the mountains of garbage. And, you know, the heat wave at that time, I was in Manila in 2015. And at that time, the heat wave was the strongest that had ever hit Asia. And that was 8 years ago. We know what has happened since then. But the very long story short was that I saw there were interconnections there. I saw that somehow the lives of the basureros in Manila was connected to the heat waves. And fortuitously, that was the exact same time that Laudato Si came out, written by Pope Francis. So it looks like I cannot share screens. I cannot offer my slides. But that's okay, because I will dive into these questions in the context of Laudato Si, which is this encyclical written on care for the environment, care for creation by the Pope. And as it turns out, he's not the only one writing about the environment. Popes have been writing about the environment for many years. And it's just that Laudato Si on care for a common home happens to be the first one, the revolutionary encyclical that speaks solely of the creation care and how we are facing many different crises that are all interconnected. And that is, in fact, one of the main messages of this encyclical. And it cannot be overstated, this idea that we are all interconnected. The Pope says that like 17 times in this encyclical. And that is the message being driven into us over and over and over again by the Pope. All things are interconnected, and that goes so deep. I wish I had the whole afternoon to talk about it. However, I do want to offer space for people later, so I'll try to keep this short here. Turning to very briefly my work and then extractive mining. I work for Laudato Si movement, which is this global organization promoting creation care, climate change education within the church, and seeking to change the conversation around how we approach these very heavy topics and how we approach our own understanding of the world. And I'm in charge of the film campaign of The Letter, which is a movie wherein the Pope has an encounter with 4 voices. Those are the groups most represented, most impacted by climate change. We know that climate change impacts all people these days very strongly, but there are different groups that are being affected most severely, most immediately, and those are the poor, the youth around the world, who will not receive the 7 generations maybe of wisdom that we've been told by Chief Lyons is so vital. Wildlife and biodiversity, and then also Indigenous people. And the Indigenous is represented by Chief Dada in Portugal and Brazil. And this is a very powerful documentary wherein Chief Dada in the Maro territory in the Amazon shares about how he was targeted because he tried to speak up against deforestation and he tried to speak up against extractive mining. And now, just now, actually yesterday, our colleagues in Ecuador, I don't know if any of you have seen the news about this recently, but the presidential candidate that was very favored to protect parts of Ecuador was assassinated. He spoke out against protection of the Yasunee. There's this ongoing nationwide voting happening for a referendum on a moratorium to stop extractive mining in the Ecuadorian part of the Amazon. And this presidential candidate is now gone. So people are actually terrified, and our coworkers, you know, we're checking in with them to try to make sure they're okay, because some of them were actually very close to this assassination. So it's very terrifying, it's very heavy. And at the same time, we understand that the Catholic Church has done a lot of damage over the years and has created a lot of conflict. And again, I wish I had time to go into all of that, but with the Pope's encyclical, the conversation has begun to change. And we are understanding that we need ever more urgently to have a new conversation. The Pope talks about a new dialogue that we are called to. And so I want to focus on that very briefly, and then I'll pass it on to others. One of the most central messages in this encyclical Laudato Si is, of course, we are all interconnected. And we are faced not with 2 separate crises, one environmental that's over here and one social with all the problems over here. They are married, they are so interwoven that we cannot separate them. And anytime we talk about the climate crisis, we are talking about poverty, we are talking about Indigenous rights, we're talking about deforestation, we are talking about all of the things, because everything is so interwoven. And if there's nothing that you take from any of us, or from me certainly today, that is the message. We are all interconnected. And because of that, we need a new dialogue. The Pope is saying so urgently, we cannot continue to talk in terms of the technocratic paradigm. We cannot continue to talk in terms of economic impacts only, human impacts only. And, you know, okay, when we talk about mining, we cannot continue to talk about projects and their ramifications for governments or for human impacts only. We have to be talking about the holistic dignity of the planet. There's this quote in Laudato Si in the middle of it. And Pope Francis says, the dignity of the world has been compromised. And that struck me so hard, because we always talk about human dignity, right? And we very clearly know what violations of human dignity look like. And when human dignity is compromised, we can point very clearly to many examples of that. But when we talk about the dignity of the world being compromised, that is so big and so heavy and so important to pay attention to. That's the new dialogue that we're being called to. That's the new paradigm. It's a new way of looking at the world, a new epistemological approach, that it's not just us and we say yes to mining or we say no to mining because of the human impacts. There's this there's this incredible story unfolding in Nevada. And I believe I should close just so we have time for others and then questions. Of this lithium project being proposed in Nevada. And it's controversial because biologists have discovered that there's this plant called the Thames buckwheat. I'm not sure if anybody has heard of this or maybe knows more about it, so I don't want to misspeak, but I do know that it is only grown there. This Thames buckwheat only grows in this very specific region of Nevada, which is now under threat by this lithium mine, which would provide something like 400,000 cars, electric cars. And the biologists are saying we have to save this plant. And of course, the lithium mining, the corporation is coming in and saying, well, it's a plant. We need the electric cars. Meanwhile, you have administrations around the world, you have the Biden administration saying, yes, the solution to our green problems, or to our climate problems rather, is to go green and buy more electric cars. The solution is buy more electric. You have this old conversation telling us we need to consume more, and that's the way out. But when we look at the plant and this incredible possibility of this plant, it's maybe medicinal, it's being understood more and more as vital because not just that it grows for us, but that it grows only there. And there are biologists speaking up and saying, look, it doesn't matter what this plant offers us. It matters that it only grows here. It is unique because it has this one place and its one purpose is to be right here. That's the new conversation. That's the new understanding of this world. We are the exact same way. We are built to be right here. And I wish I could go on. I need to stop. But that's the new dialogue we're called to.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luke. We want to be able, if possible, to come back to you, and hopefully there will be questions too. For now, I think if we could just engage our, also the other distinguished panelists, we have Michael Richardson with us. Michael, do you want to take from some of what you've heard now from Chief Lyons and from Luke about the interdependence and of it all, of all of us, and help us go back to the issues of extraction that are central to this particular conversation? Please take it from here and share with us your wisdom. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Azza. It's truly an honor to be part of this panel and to speak to this most pressing issue, this existential issue that's before us. I'm with Rivers and Mountains GreenFaith, and I'm also the facilitator for Third Act in upstate New York. My location of my residence is in the upper Hudson Valley. These are the Mohican lands. But most of the work that we're doing with the Rivers and Mountains GreenFaith is around climate finance, as well as bringing awareness to what we are doing in our own lives impacting the climate. We approach this as there being a moral imperative to stop the climate chaos. In most simple terms, and this is not to lecture any of us, but when you know that what you're doing is causing harm, and I mean harm to anything, when you know what you're doing is causing harm and you continue to do it, that itself is the definition of immoral. And so we need to be fully aware of what we are doing. Now, we often talk about aligning your money with your values. We look at one of the most effective ways to deal with the polluters, let's call them, big oil, is to stop the money pipeline, to cut off their ability to continue to extract the way they do. But we also need to be looking at, and this is what I want to speak to, is aligning our life. See, not just aligning your money with your values, but aligning your life with your values. Now, we look at this somewhat, I come out of a Buddhist tradition, a Mahayana tradition. And we look at this in terms of karma. And so I'd like to talk specifically to karmic retribution. And I want to talk about this also in terms of our ancestors, as well as what we are doing right now. But let's talk just for a moment about karmic retribution, what that means. And simply could be said that it is every deed or action has consequences. And certainly evil deeds, let's call it, bring about suffering. Now, used in this context, we could say that suffering is not a punishment that comes from a God, but rather it is an inevitable consequence of evil actions. And so there are accordingly practical reasons to avoid evil and do good, right? So I want to talk just a brief moment about our ancestral karma. I'm somewhat aware of my ancestors going back about 300 years. And these are Saxons and Anglos out of northern Germany and Denmark that were part of the invasion, the colonization of the island of Britain. And of course, time goes by and these same generations moved over to the Americas. And my direct ancestors moved into the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia and Pennsylvania and colonized that. And they certainly fit the prescription of extraction, colonization, and enslavement. They extracted from their environment, they colonized, stole the land, and they enslaved, not in their case, individuals with chattel slavery, but they enslaved others through their engagement in economy. Wage enslavement, we're familiar with that term. So those are my ancestral karma. And there are deeds and actions that have consequences that have caused suffering. Now, I want to speak just for something. There is absolutely nothing we can do about the present moment that we are in. The present moment is the coming together of all the causes and the conditions that were before us. From the 300 years of my ancestors that I just mentioned, right down to 5 seconds ago when something happened. The present moment is the coming together of all the causes and conditions that preceded it, all of them. Now, there is everything we can do about the next moment. And that's where we have to watch what our karmic input is. Because what we do as individuals and collectives, no matter how small, is going to have a karmic retribution. Is it going to be towards the evil, or is it going to be towards the good? So this is where I want to come back to your question. Should we be mining minerals for electric vehicles or so-called green technologies? Well, let's get out our karmic equation and see what we do. What happens if we don't? What happens if we stay the course? Well, I think we're all well versed on this, that we know that, as the Secretary General Guterres says, that it is an immediate need to stop the extraction of fossil fuels from the earth. Immediate, not tomorrow. So many of these government plans that we have out here, New York State among them, are too little and too late. Immediate. So if we don't do something, we know what the consequences are. We've heard this from Chief Lyons. We know this. But does it mean that we trade off one bad scenario for another bad scenario? And that's where we have so much. I mean, we need to begin with the question on whether it's even possible to construct a green future. Basically, can we mine and build enough stuff to make it happen? And in our mining and building of this, which may shut down this immediate existential threat that we have that has a tipping point of what? Do we have 5 years? Do we have 7 years, 10 years? You read the same material I read, maybe 5, 7 years until we hit a tipping point. Amazing things need to happen. Amazing things, almost impossible things to avoid those tipping points. So can we mine and build enough stuff to make it happen in the next 5, 6, 7 years to stop those tipping points? Now, one thing is that as we look at the solution, our governments worldwide from China to Australia to Europe into the Americas, is to build out electric vehicles. I have one. Heat pumps. I have two. We're converting our stove this fall, but there's this push for electric vehicles, heat pumps, and cooktops. And that's not to mention solar panels, wood, and turbines to get this electricity. And we all know that this gets back to, we need to get the material to go do it. We're back to extraction. We extract all this oil because we demand it for our consumption. And now we want to say, oh, well, that's going to overheat our planet. We can't be doing that. And so now we got to go mine all these other things that have, of course, these consequences. So again, we go back and we look at our karmic input. What decisions are we going to make? Is it going to cause harm? If it causes harm, we have a moral imperative to stop that harm. Right? So we need to be aware of what we're doing and put pressure onto our governments that the alternatives that are so essential, without a doubt, we have to do this conversion. We have to transition our economies off of fossil fuels. But now it gets into this other part of it, when we talk about aligning your money with your values by divesting in fossil fuels, moving our money out of the Wall Street banks, not having insurance policy with the fossil fuel insurance companies, not having our investments that we have towards our retirement invested in asset managers that are, again, underwriting the fossil fuel industries. We have to align our money with our values, but we also have to align our lives with our values. And I think that that's where so many of us come up so short. Most of us, I think all of us on this call, live in rich countries, which could easily make do with less, especially less energy. One study out there has calculated that to stabilize our planet's temperature, we need to decrease, just on these things, I'm going to read from some notes I have here. We need to decrease the share of passenger car transport in our cities by 81%. Now that seems astonishing, but 100 years ago, most people weren't even driving cars, right? This is, we say that we have this lifestyle and we act like it's been around for those 300 years I talked about. It's been around for actually about 70 years. So anyhow, one study out there says that we need to decrease the share of our passenger car transport by 81%. We need to limit per person air travel to 1 trip per year. Now, in 1972, more than half of Americans had never even flown on a plane, much less more than once a year. So asking people to change their lifestyle, to align their lifestyle with their values, we talk about reducing car transportation by 81%, limiting air travel to 1 trip per year. How about this? As we know, buildings and transportation account for almost 80% of the fossil fuel consumption. But one also says that we need to reduce our living space to at least 25% of what it is. We need to heat less. And I was so endeared to hear Chief Lyons when he talked about his ancestors and the longhouses. The number of people that live together in communal conditions in the longhouses. And here we have where we have 1 or 2 people living in these houses that are almost the same size, right? So as humans, we can do it. We can eat less meat or no meat. We can drive less. We can fly less. We can live in simpler houses. There's all the solutions are there because, quite candidly, we're going to be extracting. That's what we do. Now, certainly there is a way that we can go into balance, that we don't extract more than we give back, but that doesn't seem to be something that we're going to do before we hit the tipping points. So we need to, first of all, transition off of fossil fuels. That's immediate. We need to find ways in which we can extract those renewable energy resources in a way that are not causing harm to others in the planet and the planet itself. But to do so, we need to reduce our consumption. And we got to stop pointing our fingers at everybody else saying, you're the blame, because I know that my consumption is actually to blame, that it is my input into the karmic equation that is causing the harm. So I'm going to close out there, let others speak, and let's get around to some other questions.